What is up, you guys? Glitchiz here, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm bringing you a long anticipated video, and that is the unstable bomber build that I've been using within season 2 hard mode in the game. I also plan on making a bunch of different builds over the next week or two of all the different weapon types. But before we get into the details, I have to give a huge shout out to the sponsor of today's video, and that is Instant Gaming. For those of you that don't know, Instant Gaming is a killer website that gets you super reduced discounts on all your favorite gaming titles. And how it works is they basically get all of their digital CD keys straight from the source, which saves a ton of money on the production costs from buying physical copies. So you get to take advantage of all of those discounts yourself. Which typically isn't the case. The other great thing about Instant Gaming is not only do they have those huge discounts, but they have them on all the titles across pretty much every one of your favorite gaming platforms. They also offer pay cards for things like the Steam Wallet and PlayStation Store, and MMO monthly subscription cards for games like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy A Realm Reborn. So pretty much anything you could think of when it comes to gaming and all of your gaming title needs, Instant Gaming has you covered. So feel free to check the first link down in the description and go start saving some money. Also, as part of my partnership with Instant Gaming, for every month that we're partnered, we're going to be doing a special giveaway. One lucky winner each month is going to be selected and be able to choose a game of your choice. So all you have to do is click the second link down in the description and just click one button on that website to participate. From what I'm told, you just have to click a few more links to follow Instant Gaming across different social media platforms to increase your chances of winning. And at the end of the month, again, one lucky winner is going to be drawn and you'll be able to pick any game you would like from the website. So great incentive to check it out. But without any further ado, big shout out again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring the video, but let's jump into it. First thing we can go over is going to be the weapons of choice for this build. It's Unstable Bomber. Go-to weapon is going to be the Jaws. The reason why this weapon is so good is because it triggers Unstable Bomber every 4 shots. Your critical hits count as 1 shot above the normal amount, and after hitting a weak spot, you gain explosion and elemental damage plus 30% for 8 seconds, as well as it makes Unstable Bombers crit and has a bonus crit rate of 25%. The reason why that is important is because if we go to the tooltip for Unstable Bomber, it says trigger 1 status damage blast of 100% your psi intensity after 0.1 seconds with a blast radius of 1.5 meters. The damage will decay over the explosion distance down to a minimum of 50%. However, the additional damage will be blast element and cannot crit, cannot strike weak spots, and will not decay with distance. So not decaying with distance is always good, but it normally cannot crit. However, with the innate perk from the Jaws weapon, having that ability to make Unstable Bomber crit means our explosions are going to be doing a ton more damage. So really good perks, and the main reason why the Jaws is one of the best Unstable Bomber weapons in the game. But as for the accessories that I use on it, I run the Tactical Flash Hider for the muzzle. For optics, I run the Compact Reflex Sight. For tactics, I run the Small Infrared Indicator. For the magazine, I have the Gold Extended Pistol Mag. For the mods, the 2 that I would recommend if you want maximum damage would be Reckless Bomber Violent Variation. For every 1% crit rate, Unstable Bomber damage is increased by 0.5%. The main substats that you're going to want to focus on is crit damage, weapon damage, and damage to great ones. Having a few randomly sprinkled throughout for increased mag capacity is also nice as well. But the other option for golden mods that if you don't necessarily care about max burst damage, but just want good sustained damage, would be the Bombardier Souvenir mod. When triggering Unstable Bomber, you automatically refill 10% of your magazine. So this sort of gives you a similar feel to how the unlimited ammo shrapnel build worked, except this one will work for the Jaws. You just feel like you never have to reload, and your mag gets extended quite a bit before you have to reload. Again, same substats, crit damage, weapon damage, and damage to great ones is what you're going to want to focus on for that. But those are the 2 best mods, in my opinion, for the gun, at least for the Jaws. Moving on to the secondary weapon, I like to run Bullseye as my secondary source of bonus damage, and we have 3 options to choose from. They're all good in their own right, depending on the situation. For this particular demo on the dummy, I'm going to be running the Recurve Crossbow. This one will proc the bullseye effect, which will basically highlight an enemy and make them take 8% more damage as long as you hit the weak spot. But it also will increase our crit rate by an additional 15% against the target that is marked. So really good option there. And by the way, for all of these three options, the mod I would recommend on all of them is going to be the Gold Vulnerability Amplifier mod. This will increase the bullseye's vulnerability effect by another 8%, making it 16% bonus damage that they'll take. So really good combination with bullseye weapons. But the second option that I would recommend would be the Bingo Sniper Rifle. This one is good because it has a 70% chance normal to trigger the bullseye, but an instant chance no matter what on the first shot, as long as you're switching to the bingo from a secondary weapon, which we'll pretty much always be doing. It also grants weak spot damage plus 15% on hit for 10 seconds, which can stack up to 3 times. So you can continuously shoot the bullseye, get up to 30 or 45% bonus weak spot damage if you can get that full 3 stacks up. And after defeating an enemy with a weak spot hit, you get plus 15% attack for 20 seconds. The bonus weak spot damage, however, I don't believe transfers over to a secondary weapon, so that's the one downside. The go-to one that I typically use on my day-to-day runs is going to be the Deagle 50 caliber Wildfire. This one's amazing because it can also proc bullseye with a 60% trigger chance. However, it has an 80% chance to spread that bullseye effect to an additional target within a 15-meter area. It also gives plus 25% weapon damage for 10 seconds as long as there's no enemies within the surrounding area when you're doing the bullseye effect. And when hitting a weak spot of said marked enemy, you get a plus 3% attack bonus, which can stack up to 3 times, and that does carry over to additional weapons once you swap. So that is 9% bonus attack damage there if you can get all 3 stacks up and running, which is pretty nice. Again, for the sake of the demo though, I'm going to be running the recurve crossbow. Also, for the calibration mod that I recommend on all of these secondary weapons would be the portable type, just because it increases your swap speed. And since we're not going to be primarily shooting this weapon, we're only going to be using it to proc bullseye. Getting back to our primary weapon as fast as possible is the main priority. So portable style is what I would recommend for all of these secondary weapons, in my opinion, including the melee weapon. But that is the Wildfire. I can quickly go over the accessories here. I use the Tactical Flash Hider, Compact Reflex Sight, Integrated Laser Sight, and Extended Pistol Mag. Last but not least, we can go over the melee weapon. There's only one option, in my opinion, for pretty much every build right now, and that is the Long Axe. Basically, the reason it's so good is it's an innate perk. Upon doing a heavy attack, will activate Fortress Warfare. And for those of you that don't know what Fortress Warfare is, if we click that and go to the tooltip, Fortress Warfare will basically grant you and all allies within your Fortress Warfare buff super armor and 20% bonus weapon damage. You can combo this with potentially 2 different mods to make it even better. The one that I typically run is Portable Territory. After leaving Fortress Warfare, the status of Fortress Warfare will remain for an additional 2 seconds, giving us that 25% bonus damage for a little bit longer duration. The other option that you can run would be Final Territory. When Fortress Warfare ends, you get 10% bonus weapon damage and 10% movement speed for 10 seconds. So you're basically swapping out 2 seconds of big burst damage at 25% for 10 seconds of a little bit lower 10% bonus damage. So they're both pretty even. Just go with what you like for your playstyle the most, but both are really good options. But that was what I would recommend for the melee weapon. Moving on to the armor, what we're going to be running is 4-piece Lone Wolf set for the 4-piece set bonuses. First piece will give us 10% bonus mag capacity. Second piece will give us 5% crit rate. Third piece will start giving us 1 stack of Lone Shadow with every 2 weapon critical hits. And Lone Shadow gives us 6% bonus crit damage for 30 seconds and can stack up to 8 times. Once we get the 4th piece, however, we increase the max Lone Wolf stacks up to 10, as well as get a bonus critical rate increase by 8% for 2 seconds every time we reload. So that's a big boost to our crit rate and critical damage with the 4-piece set. That's why I like to run that. For the one-off piece, I like to run a 1-piece Bastille for the pants. One piece for this will give us 10% more weapon damage as long as our health is above 70%. And then the last and most important piece for our key armor piece will be the Shaman Vulture Top. After triggering Unstable Bomber, we get plus 35% crit rate for 3 seconds. And the reason why this is amazing is because our Unstable Bomber procs are basically based around our crit rate. And as we stand with our normal details, we are at a base 35.5% crit rate. So once we get that full stack from our Shaman Vulture Top, we'll be closer to 70%, which is pretty nuts. We're also sitting at base 112% crit damage, which is always good. So that is the armor pieces. For the mods on the helmet, this is the one-off one that I would recommend that isn't the main 3 priority stats, is Deviation Expert. 2 options you can choose from. If you're running Deviation Expert, you get 10% fire rate, 20% status damage at the cost of 25% range. Not a big deal, but I would recommend going with element and status damage substats because it'll just increase our explosion damage more, and that's what the Deviation Expert mod revolves around. The other option that, in my opinion, has the potential to do even more if you get the right substats, at least for PvE, is going to be Momentum Up, preferably the Violent variation for that guaranteed crit damage. And what this one does is it increases our fire rate by another 10%, always good on pistols, for the first half of the magazine, and then it gives us 30% flat weapon damage for the second half. Again, crit damage, weapon damage, and damage to great ones is what you would want to focus on for that. Both are very good options. Depending on your substats, it could go either way. Pick the one that you have the best substats for, in my opinion. They're both pretty good. But ideally, I think Momentum Up, if I had the right substats, would potentially be a little bit better, at least for PvE. But that is the helmet. Moving on to the mask, we have the Lone Wolf Mask. We have 2 options for this as well. The one for the demonstration I'm going to be doing right now is Targeted Strike, preferably the Violent variation for the guaranteed crit damage. But when hitting marked enemies, we get 10% bonus crit rate as well as 25% crit damage. The other option that is also really good and potentially better for single target burst damage is going to be the Point Detonation mod in the Violent variation, because when Unstable Bomber hits only one enemy, your Unstable Bomber final damage is increased by 25%. So you're going to see huge spikes to your explosion procs from Unstable Bomber with this perk in particular, but it's only good if you have single targets. If you're fighting normal, like big, close range, packed up groups of mods, you're not going to be able to take advantage of that. That's why Targeted Strike is typically better, especially if you're using the Wildfire, where you can spread those marks pretty quickly. But both are really good options, so feel free to choose whatever one you want, depending on which one has the best substats. Moving on to the chest piece, for maximum damage, I would recommend going with the Crit Damage Enhancement mod. That'll give 2% crit rate, 12% crit damage. Mine rolled with crit damage and damage to great ones. Another option you could do if you're focusing on status damage would be the Flame Resonance mod. I find that the crit rate enhancement mod tends to be a little bit more consistent. That's why I run that, but they are pretty similar. Another option, if you're not, say, a veteran and you feel like you're not used to Unstable Bomber yet and you're taking a little bit too much damage and you want some more survivability, a really good secondary option that you could do to keep you alive a little bit longer would be Rejuvenating. When HP is above 60%, a kill will recover 15% lost HP. So this, again, will give you a little bit more survivability, keep your health up, and also combo really well with the One Piece Bastille that we're using to keep us above that 70%. So we always have that bonus 10% weapon damage from that innate armor perk going on. This will keep us topped up at all times. So in hard mode and things like that, this is also a really good option potentially if you're okay with losing a bit of max DPS. But that is what I would recommend for the top. Moving on to the pants, I recommend the Deadshot Gold mod, preferably the Violent variation. Each critical hit by non-melee weapons grants 5% crit damage up to 45%. The effect is removed upon the next reload. Again, you're going to want crit damage, weapon damage, and damage to great ones on this. Mine isn't fully maxed out, so there's going to be room for improvement on all of these mods, in my opinion. I haven't min-maxed any of these, but that is what I would recommend for the pants. Moving on to the gloves, we got potentially 2 options here. The main one that I think is a little bit better would be Crit Amplifier. This will give us 10% crit rate as well as 15% crit damage. Again, You want Violent Variation for the guaranteed crit damage secondary stat, weapon damage, great one damage, ammunition capacity. Those are always good substats on that. But the other option, if you feel like your crit damage is pretty good and your crit rate is lacking, would be the crit boost mod. This will give us flat 15% crit rate, which will increase the chances of our unstable bomber proccing by a little bit more at the expense of critical damage, but still pretty decent mod to choose. I just find the amplifier to be a little bit better, but both are pretty good options. So that is the gloves. And then last but not least, for the boots, we have our final 4-piece for the Lone Wolf set. And the only mod that I would recommend across the board is the Gold Covered Advance mod. Taking no damage within 4 seconds grants 20% melee, weapon, and status damage for 30 seconds. The effect resets when the duration ends. Preferably, you want the Violent Variation again for that crit damage, weapon damage, and damage to great ones. Technically, if you don't have a good roll of Covered Advance, you could run something like Slow and Steady. This will also potentially give you 20% bonus to all of those damage types. However, 10% of it is flat. The other percent is based off your health, which requires you to be above 90%. So if you're not at 90% or more health at all times, you're basically going to be losing half of the damage bonus from this perk, which is why I feel like Covered Advance is a little bit more consistent. Dodging enemies and not getting hit for 4 seconds is much easier to do than always being at 90% health at all times. So that's why it's the best choice in my opinion, the Covered Advance mod. So that is the mods and the weapon pieces and armor pieces that I would recommend for the build. The next thing that we can go over is the Cradle Perks. So for the first row, the one that I recommend, this is a given, handgun enhancement. You get 20% increased damage when holding pistols. You also reload 1 ammunition from reserves after defeating an enemy. In the next row, go-to one is going to be Deviation Master. While your deviation is present, your damage against Great One bosses and elites is increased by 25%. Another option in particular, if you're going specifically against the Great One bosses, would be Master Tactician. After using a tactical item, damage against Great One bosses is increased by another 25% for 15 seconds. And on the topic of tactical items, a fun one that I've been using lately that goes perfectly with Unstable Bomber is actually going to be this item right here. And it is the Golden Knife. This is a really, really strong tactical item that does 2010 base damage plus 400% psi intensity damage when you throw it at an enemy. However, when you hit an enemy, it will trigger Unstable Bomber. And if you hit the weak spot of a monster, it will trigger Unstable Bomber twice. So it's a Unstable Bomber based tactical item that does a ton of damage, even more than the Atomic Lighter, in my opinion. The only downside is you need a special mimetic specialization in order to get it. It's going to be one of the later tier ones called Golden Knife. This will allow you to craft those. But if you get it, it is a really high damage, fun tactical item to use in combination with that Master Tactician perk from your Cradle. So I would highly recommend crafting those if you get it. It's really, really cool. But that is a flex pick depending on if you're fighting bosses. Moving on, you want Tactical Combo. You get 25% bonus weapon damage for 4 seconds after reloading or switching weapons, which we should always be doing with our Bullseye weapon, as well as Status Enhancement after hitting a weak spot, which we should also be doing. Our status damage will be increased by 25%. Moving on, both of these perks are pretty much made for Unstable Bomber, so they're guaranteed for this build, in my opinion. First, we have First Round Blast. Every time we reload, you get an instant damage boost to Unstable Bomber by 25%. And then Series Detonation, after a unit takes damage from Unstable Bomber. If the unit takes damage from the Unstable Bomber a second time within 3 seconds, the final damage will be increased by 25%. And because our crit rate is so high with this build and we're proccing that Unstable Bomber really fast, chances of you hitting an enemy with Unstable Bomber twice before it dies is pretty common. So this is a big boost to your final burst damage, this perk here. Really good for Unstable Bomber. Moving on, in the final row, I would recommend Steady Hand, at least when you're using your long axe consistently, especially against boss fights. While in Fortress Warfare, our weak spot damage will be increased by 40%, and the weak spot damage to the Bullseye is going to be increased by 20%. So a huge jump in damage as long as we're in Fortress Warfare, which will get extended again by the mods we're using on the Long Axe as well. The other one is going to be Lone Wolf or Lone Walker. When fighting solo, our medicine usage speed is increased by 35%. Damage from monsters will be reduced by 30% when your HP is below 30%. And the damage in general to monsters overall gets increased by a flat 20%. So as long as you're by yourself, this is a really good perk to take. However, if you're in a party or in a raid or going against great ones with multiple people, I would swap this for something like either Master Tactician or Bounty Hunter. After defeating a unit you marked, your weapon damage will be increased by 25%, and the weapon damage or weak spot damage will be increased by 35%. So really good combination with bullseye weapons. So this would be the one that I would swap out if you want one of these other two perks. And this overall is the ones that I would pick for the particular build. Last but not least, the deviations of choice. You pretty much have two options in my opinion. First, second best in my opinion would be the Wolf. That will give bonus to weapon damage as well as hold aggro and have a bit of crowd control. However, the best pick, in my opinion, for Unstable Bomber in particular is going to be the Shattered Maiden. The reason why Shattered Maiden is so good is because it can not only directly damage the enemy that you target, but it can slow and chain enemies, so it also has crowd control. And the Shattered Maiden in general has a secondary buff that increases your explosion damage by 40%, which can potentially increase the higher the deviation skill rating. So really, really good specifically for Unstable Bomber builds because our Unstable Bomber damage is explosive damage, the element type. So really good and pretty much a deviation made for Unstable Bomber in my opinion. Just to give you an idea, my level 1 Shattered Maiden gave me a higher damage boost than a level 3 Wolf. So if you get a level 5 Shattered Maiden, you're going to be doing even more damage with this build. Again, my stuff isn't fully min-maxed as best as it could be because I'm trying to cover multiple builds in one season. I don't really have the resources or the time to min-max every single one. So just keep that in mind as we go along as well. If you follow along with everything that I'm showing you, you should consistently, if you min-max it, see 85 to 100k DPS with this build. I'm hoping that we get closer to about like 70 with what I have, just because my stuff isn't maxed out yet, but still very good. And even at 70,000, you can do pretty much all the content in the game, even on pro mode. So it should be good regardless. But those are the two deviation choices. Finally, before we get to the damage test, I want to go over some good food options. So the two main ones that I would recommend is going to be the Whimsical Drink. This will give 25% bonus to our status damage across the board, and then Crumbly Bread. This will increase all of our weapon damage by 25%. So between the two, which you can stack at the same time, you're getting a ton of bonus damage just from your main weapon damage and to your explosion damage. If you don't have the ingredients to consistently craft these, other ones that are pretty good, that are a little more user-friendly, would be Assorted Canned Fruit. This will increase your weak spot damage by 25% as long as you have 80 or more sanity. Some other good ones would be something like the Hot Dog, increased damage by 20% towards enemies affected by the Bullseye, which we'll always be doing because our secondary weapon is a Bullseye weapon. So those are some good alternate options that you can run if you don't have a lot of the deviated ingredients. But that is the food options of choice that I would recommend. Lastly, I guess we can go and check out the damage tests, which is on my bottom floor. I don't know why I'm running up the stairs. Let's go ahead and eat our food because I am dying of thirst right now. And then basically the order of operations that you're going to want to do this is summon your deviation, preferably with your axe already in hand. Do a heavy swing, but cancel the animation halfway through and immediately switch to your bullseye weapon. Tag the enemy with bullseye and then swap to your final primary and just unload damage into them. So let's see if we can pull it off here now. Hopefully this dummy doesn't bug out. My Frost Shattered Maiden wasn't attacking properly earlier, so hopefully it works, but here we go. So designate target, cancel the animation, tag with bullseye, and we're off. Keep it going. So we almost hit 70k there. I could have staggered it a little bit to combine my damage with the delayed damage from the Shattered Maiden. But what was that? 3 mags. We're at 1.5 million DPS. Almost 70k damage. I've seen it a little above 70k consistently. Things are a little bit buggy in my territory. Some were affected by the animals. I had to pull all the animals out, so that could have been it too. But either way, that's plenty enough damage to handle everything in the game. But yeah, that is the Unstable Bomber build. If you guys enjoyed it, if you found it informative, be sure to smash that like button, comment down below. I appreciate all of your guys' feedback. Let me know which build you'd want to see next. I've prepped pretty much every weapon type in the game, so let me know, and maybe that will be the next one I release. And on that note, if you want to keep up to date with all those future videos, be sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you get those alerts. And then last but not least, if you want to join a killer community of like-minded gamers, feel free to check the links down in the description below the instant gaming links, and join us on the Discord. We've got over 1,000 members in there now, many of which are playing Once Human. So hopefully you jump in and we see you guys around here soon. But until the next time, hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you all later.